Hi, I'm Matt Roy from Blue Ocean Benefits and Consulting. Today we're going to talk about basic health insurance plan designs and how you can figure out when you're faced with a choice which plan is right for you. Okay, so if you've ever had to pick a health insurance plan from your employer or even from your, if you get it on your own on one of the ACA websites, it's pretty intimidating, all the different plan designs, what they mean. And this is by no means just part of it. I mean, this is just part of it. It's by no means inclusive of everything, but the biggest problem that we see out there is people not knowing what the different plan designs mean. Today, what we're going to talk about is we're going to walk you all the way through all of the different plan designs that you can pick from when you buy in health insurance. Now, some of these plan designs are no longer available. Some of them you won't see very often, but they're all sort of the history of health insurance for the last 30 years. And we're going to use this graph right here that you can see on the screen. So if you look at this graph, and you can see the first plan we're going to talk about is Indemnity. The axes on the chart are as price goes up on the left side, and then flexibility and freedom. So you have more flexibility and freedom to the right, you have less flexibility and freedom to the left. And what I sort of have always told people is you don't pay in health insurance for benefits, you pay for flexibility and freedom. So a lot of times you'll find an HMO that has better benefits than a PPO. But people will say, but a PPO is better. Well, why are they saying a PPO is better, but you look at it and say that HMO looks better to me? And that's because the copays might be better on the HMO, but there are other things involved that make the PPO more attractive to a lot of people. So that's what we're talking about today, the plan designs and what's involved in them. So the first one is an indemnity plan. Indemnity is the original insurance. It just means, indemnify means to make you whole. It's really how your car insurance works. You have a claim with your car insurance, you pay for it, they reimburse you the deductible, or maybe you get it fixed and you have to pay the deductible. So indemnify means to make it whole. And in the old days, you would go to the doctor, you go to the hospital, you would pay for your bill, the insurance company would pay you back what you owe, what you paid the doctor minus any deductible and minus any co-insurance. There was no managed care, there was no you have to go to this doctor or that doctor. It was wherever you went, they applied a scale and said, this is our usual customer and reasonable scale that most doctors will accept, and we'll pay this much, and they would apply that. So indemnity is the first kind of plan to make whole. So that's no network, no rules, no nothing. So that's why it's on the far right of the flexibility scale there, right? And it's also at the high end because no rules. You can go wherever you want. You can do whatever you want. So you're going wherever you want. You're doing whatever you want. The price, you're kind of just can go to any doctor in or out of network, so you're going to have more expenses. To drop down dropping to the left, we're kind of working right to left here, is a PPO. PPO is a really common plan. A lot of people use that word. We see it in dental also. PPO means Preferred Provider Organization. How I always describe a PPO is you can go to anybody you want, but it's to your advantage to use someone in the network. So it's basically an indemnity plan like we just described. You go and you get reimbursed with a network laid on top of it. And when you lay that network on top of it, those providers that are in that network have agreed to two things. They've agreed to take payment from the carrier's payment in full, and they've agreed to process the claim for you. What does the first thing mean, payment in full? It means that if you go to a doctor without any agreement with a hospital, if the insurance carrier doesn't pay the full bill, which they sometimes don't, you're going to be negotiating that with a doctor. If you go to a doctor who's already negotiated with a carrier, you're not responsible for that. So what a PPO does is it still gives you indemnity out of network, but in the network it protects you. It keeps the prices lower, makes them send the thing in, maybe makes them get an authorization here or there. So it protects you. So by going in network, you protect yourself, you lower your cost, but you can still go out of network. So it's an indemnity plan with a little bit of benefit. That's why we drop it down on the flexibility and the price. Okay, so it drops down a little bit. The next one is something that a lot of people never heard of, but it's an OAPOS, or what we call an open access point of service. So point of service is really what it's an HMO in network and an indemnity plan out of network. Okay, so it's kind of something that came up in the 80s and 90s, and it's a dumb name. But a point of service is like a PPO, but it has more managed care in the network, okay? So we'll get to point of service in a minute, but an OA POS means you don't need referrals in network. So it's gonna look and feel like a PPO. You're gonna have a small network, smaller network. You're gonna be able to go in network as you please, go to a specialist, whatever, or you can go out of network. So it's really gonna look and feel like a PPO. It's just a drop down below that because it does have a little more managed care in it. It probably requires more authorizations if you're gonna have something serious done. So that's why we put it right below the right below a PPO. But a lot of people with an open access point of service are gonna think they have a PPO the way it operates. If you come down a little bit, again to the left, we go to EPO and POS. They're right next to each other. Again, point of service POS, that's what I just described. The difference between a POS and an OA POS would be there would be referrals required in network. So now you're talking about if you want to see a specialist in the network, you have to get the permission of your primary care. So that means you have to either see your primary care first or you have to talk to them and they have to write you an insurance referral. Obviously significantly less flexibility, right? You want to go to a neurologist, you call your primary and he or she says, hey, come in and see me. I don't know if you need to see a neurologist. So you don't get to go see that neurologist unless they sign off on it. Much different than a PPO or even an OA POS where you can just go wherever you want. You can go directly to a specialist. So lower on the flexibility. EPO is an exclusive provider organization. So that's like a PPO with no out-of-network. The PPO is an indemnity plan with a network on top of it. An EPO is just the network piece and no out-of-network. Can't go to anybody out of the network. So again, less flexibility, right? Less flexibility and freedom because now you can't go out of network at all. So every plan I've described so far, allowed you to go out of network until we got to the EPO. Now that plan does not let you go out of network at all. That plan, however, like a PPO, doesn't require you to get referrals to see your specialist. So that's why it's next to a POS, because while a POS makes you get a referral to see a specialist in network and an EPO doesn't, a POS has out of network benefits and EPO doesn't. So they're two, they're sort of canceling out advantages to that, and that's why we put that right sort of in the middle. One consideration for all of this is the size of the network. Is it national? Is it regional? Is it local? And the size of the network near you. So an EPO that has no out of network, but that has a national network, so it's huge, versus a local PPO where only doctors and hospitals that are local are in network. That would, that might actually make an EPO better. So obviously there's factors like that. So we're kind of working our way down the continuum from an indemnity plan will let you do anything, a PPO which lets you do anything, but if you go in network, it's better. If you stumble into a in-network doctor, you're going to do better. Down to some plans that require you to stay in network or require you to get referrals to get that lower cost. So we're getting into some requirements of that. Point of service would be an HMO in network. It would require referrals. It would act like an HMO in network, but then it would have the additional indemnity plan out of network, so it's a little bit better. Then the next thing down is an open access HMO. So an HMO, open access HMO would be no referrals. Don't know why you would call it an HMO if it's open access, but they're out there. And no out of network. So an HMO is a health maintenance organization. It's where you go to your primary, you pick a primary, they coordinate your care. It's supposed to lower costs. I don't think it did. And I have some other videos about that say why it didn't. But an HMO has no out of network and requires referrals. So an open access HMO and an EPO are really similar, but an HMO is going to have more behind the scenes restrictions. They're going to maybe say you can only go here for lab work or you can only do this or that. So that's why it's a little bit more down the continuum, but it's very similar to an EPO. HMO, very famous. HMO is a limited network of providers. You pick one, you must go to that one. They coordinate all your care. There's no out of network. That's a traditional HMO. That is rarely seen these days, but they're still out there, and there's some good ones out there. But you need a referral to see any specialist, so you can only see your primary. They coordinate all your care. That's supposed to lower the cost. You cannot go out of network, and you cannot go directly to a specialist. ACO. An ACO is something that came out of the Affordable Care Act. It's a accountability care organization, and it's basically an HMO. It's basically a really small, group that says we can coordinate your care. And we get into more what an ACO is, but an ACO is something that's relatively new, and it's really about incenting providers to do the right thing to keep costs down. So small, like an HMO, not as much flexibility. The last one on the far left, it has the lowest price, and it also has the least amount of flexibility, is a staff model HMO. Now, ironically, a staff model HMO is also generally considered the way that we get the best care. So Mayo Clinic, I believe, is considered a staff model HMO, and Mayo Clinic's sort of famous for its care. Some of the Kaiser and Tufts plans, those are staff model HMOs. And there's plenty of others too. So a staff model HMO is where the doctors and providers actually work for the HMO. And therefore, they're not incented to bill extra to get more money. So if I work for the HMO and I just can use the MRI machine as much as I want, and I can do whatever I want, and there's no extra money in it, if I use the MRI machine, I'm not going to get more money. I'm going to probably just think less about revenue and billing and all that stuff, and just give you the appropriate level of care. So it can lower the cost of care, but it can also increase the amount of care, because I can get that MRI once or twice and it doesn't cost anything. So ironically, the least flexible and lowest cost plan is oftentimes considered to be the highest level of care by many people in the industry. So why would someone say an indemnity plan is better than a staff model HMO? Because indemnity plans let you do what you want. So you can go wherever you want. So if you think you need to go to a doctor in Manhattan or in Park Avenue, or in San Francisco or LA, because you want to go to the best person that you know and they're the best in the world and I'm going to them, well, that's an indemnity plan, or maybe a PPO out of network. You can't do that with a staff model HMO, because more than likely that person doesn't work at the staff model HMO. So that's what's so tricky about this whole thing. So on top of that, you're going to look at benefits, you're going to look at cost, you're going to look at size of network, you're going to look at different things, you're going to look at the carrier and all that. So that's just one part of it. But when you're looking at health plans, and maybe you get a sheet now from your employer or from the ACA, and you see all these plans, EPOs, PPOs, HMOs, maybe this video helps you understand a little bit what each of those is. If you have any questions, certainly put them in the comment below. Like, subscribe, it helps us a lot. And I hope you found this video helpful. I'm Matt Roy from Blue Ocean Benefits and Consulting.